Okay, good morning. As they say in Hebrew, before I greet and welcome you, I would like to say a few words as a historian. First of all, I'm very glad to be here and to open this conference on trauma testimony and discourses. And I'm very much impressed by the richness of the program as I've seen it. I would say that I'm also delighted as a historian to see that there are quite a few historical events which are going to be mentioned and perhaps analyzed, and they are not absent as very often happens in these deliberations. For unexpected or rather unexplained reasons, I was invited 7 years ago to a similar conference at Haifa University. There was one on trauma there, and I was asked to present a paper, a historical paper, and I focused on what I termed the 1945 revolution in Britain. So you'd ask me what sort of revolution was there in 1945. I will just mention that normally we tend to look, at least laymen, not people experts here, but to look at national traumas as things that happen like now recently in Egypt or in the Arab world, or the intifadas here in Israel, or the revolution, the French, the Russian, the Bolshevik revolution, etc. But I felt, and I hope that experts here will agree with me, that a relatively peaceful event such as the July elections in 1945 in Britain and similar developments can also become quite national traumas. Indeed, it is often in the interwar years, during peace, let's say periods of quietness and peaceful events, that things actually happened, and there are quite a few troubles, and we are on the very verge of trauma, at least as I see it as a historian, and that we get bogged down in such situations. In short, in 1945 and the years that followed these very elections, July elections in Britain, Britain faced quite a difficult situation, quite traumatic. The loss of British hegemony all over the world, financial and territorial losses, and the diminishing of British prestige and strength throughout the world, and there was quite a, I think, psychological effect to this situation. And I argued somewhere else that the elections, the election results of July 26, 1945, during those days it took about 3 weeks for the elections, the results to be known. The British public was quite in trauma when they realized that the legendary Churchill lost the elections. Less than that, they couldn't actually understand how such a grey person like Attlee won the elections, and there was quite, I would say, fear and some sort of traumatic feelings as what would happen of Great Britain. And the people, as we know from contemporaries, stood in streets and corner streets and were weeping, literally were weeping when the results were known to the wide public, not least when they were asked whom did they vote for. They said, we voted for Attlee, but we hoped that Churchill would win as always. And the reason was that, of course, there was a different agenda altogether when Britain got out of the war. The idea was to really have a country for heroes to live in. This was the slogan. And when Churchill heard of this, of the news, he of course mocked Attlee, as we all know, and there are this famous saying of Churchill that Attlee was a modest man who has much to be modest about. And also he was saying when Attlee arrived in 10 Downing Street, he said when he arrived there to Downing Street and when the door was open, this was an empty taxi, and the door was open and Attlee emerged out of this taxi. Now, this was quite traumatic also when we understand that the results were really lopsided altogether. The Labour won 393 seats and the Conservatives only 147. And the story goes that when Attlee visited King George VI at Buckingham Palace to kiss his hands, as it was then known, the notorious laconic Attlee and the notoriously tongue-tied George VI, we have just seen the film of the King's speech, George VI, stood there for some minutes in silence before Attlee finally volunteered remark, and he said, "I've won the election." And the king replied, "I know, I've heard it on the 6 o'clock news." But altogether, in short, the public desired no more heroism, let alone jingoism of any sort, and war talk, etc., but rather, as I said, a country for heroes to live in. And they faced a totally new situation, but nevertheless there was a lot of anxiety in the air, and I think very little has been written on these years. So I just said I would mention this, and I really wish you very fertile deliberations here and successful conference, and I welcome our guests from abroad on behalf of the President and myself. All the best.